Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Sean McGinn's podcast. Today we are going to talk about a fascinating topic, and it's a one which can be controversial in nature in the fitness and health industry, like most things. But what we're going to do, we're going to break it down so after today you're going to have no qualms about what to believe. We're going to spit the truth in today's podcast, and we're going to talk about cardiovascular training. Who needs it? When do we need it? How to program it? We're going to look at some of the adaptations that you can only get from cardio training that you can't necessarily get from weight training or interval training, which would be kind of the higher intensity aspect. So when we're looking at cardio training, we'll basically break it down into aerobic training. Think kind of that medium intensity, long duration. Could be like a boxer doing his road runs or a swimmer doing his long distance swims, triathletes, marathon runners. That's the extreme end of cardio training. But yeah, think medium intensity, long duration. The other type of cardiovascular training will be your high intensity training, where you go really hard into that kind of maximal heart rate zone, recover, go again. And in today's age, it's very popular, the high intensity classes, interval training classes, and we're going to talk about some of the things that you probably haven't heard in relation to these classes, so you can make the right decision about whether you need them or not, or there's a time and place as well for that. We're also going to look at how to program, as I said, how to program this cardiovascular, the different type of methods, and this will be for anyone, even for the gym novice, all the way up to the most advanced athlete. I'm not going to look at it in a sporting sense today, but you can think of like advanced quote-unquote fitness person, someone that trains every day or twice a day, or someone in that nature. We're going to look at how to apply these methods and principles to all the scenarios. Okay. And again, this is something I wish I knew starting off as a trainer. Back then, I kind of grimace and cringe about some of the stuff. Not that I was saying, because it was some of the stuff that was being taught back then by the leaders in the fitness industry. So a lot of courses I would go to, they would say you only need interval training, you don't need aerobic cardio training. You would always see the picture of the sprinter beside the marathon runner. Okay, this is the marathon runner having kind of that skinny fat body type, but they don't have much muscle. And then the sprinter having a lot of muscle and not much body fat. And that's more the ideal type body we want, in a sense. Not that I'm speaking for most people, but from dealing with a lot of people, they would prefer that over the other. And one of the reasons, and even today it's still more popular, and it's just the sound bites that we hear. So they think they did a study where they compared interval training to steady state aerobic training. It was a 4-week study. The interval training group increased their VO2 max, which is basically a measure of the fitness, and I think they burn more fat or something like that as well. So people must thought, okay, interval training is more bang for your buck. If you're short on time, this will be the way to go. We don't need any steady state training. Obviously, with sound bites, the problem with that is there was a few aspects and key things missing when people used to talk about this, and the fact that there was only, I think, 7 people in each group, which is hardly, it's not really enough for statistical significance in a sense. As well as this, that when they followed up, I think the interval group burned themselves out after a few weeks. So one of the things which we're going to talk about, and we're going to look at how to program more aerobic, and when you could do interval training then along a periodization. The interval group burned themselves out very quick, whereas the steady state group, although they didn't get quicker results in that 4-week period, they kept progressing thereafter that period. Okay, so there lies a few things. So First of all, when it comes to cardio training, and we're going to skip back in between topics today, there's a lot of adaptations that you cannot get from typical weight training and typical interval training that you can only get from aerobic cardio training. When I say cardio training in today's podcast, I'm referring to that medium intensity, long duration type work. Okay, so just in case, just to differentiate between that. One of the main guys giving information out there is a guy called Joel Jameson. And it's an interesting story. He was a strength coach. I think both of his parents passed of some kind of cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, or something related in that. I think that was one of the reasons that got him and delved him in further in regards to conditioning and aerobic fitness. In America, he says 1 in 3 people are going to suffer from cardiovascular disease. Now, obviously, we know that's related to weight and calories and all the other stuff we talk about as well. But as I'm going to talk about here, there's some adaptations that you can only get from cardio training that can help prevent this cardiovascular or heart attacks or any type of condition in that realm. And he stated, of the 1 in 3 that will suffer from cardiovascular disease, 80% of that is preventable. 80% of those conditions are preventable, which is absolutely massive. And it's going to be similar in Australia, if you're listening over here, or Ireland, where we're in that kind of Western world of all the stuff we've talked about in the previous podcast related to obesity, etc. So it's going to be similar statistics in our countries as well. There are some absolutely fascinating adaptations that happen after a few weeks, few months of aerobic training. Now, when we talk about aerobic training, to define it a little bit further, it would be training in that kind of 120 to 150 beats per minute. Okay? So within this, the measure of that will be like, if you're not going to do the old school finger on the pulse, which would be hard to do while you're training. An easy way of measuring this, which something I have on already, would be like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or a heart rate monitor, which we can touch on as well. So that's the method that we're referring to. And actually, when you think of it, we measure our weights, we measure our calories, we measure our own weight, we measure weight in the gym. So this is another measurement that we still need to look at, especially when we're going to talk about the benefits of staying within this zone or heart rate zone, because we need to know we're doing it and we're in it to get those benefits. And yeah, when you think of it, it's another thing that we should measure the same way we would all those other aspects. So 120 beats per minute to 150 beats per minute. And that will kind of be, if you're thinking about without a heart rate monitor, it's like you're out of breath, but your muscles are not burning, so you haven't reached that level where you kind of feel that lactate kind of acidity feeling within your muscles. And you can still hold a conversation in a sense. You can still say it. You're not completely out of breath. Now, within this aerobic zone, for those that say are a little bit older, you probably be at the lower level where you're at like 120 to 130. The younger you are, you'll be probably more in that 140, 150 range. It is basically just a measurement of it's a percentage of your maximum heart rate. So it's in around, on average, around that 70% of your maximum heart rate. So if someone wanted to do this, you get like maximum heart rate, and that would be a fun way of just training until your heart rate stops going up using the heart rate monitor, which is not fun, but you can just take it within this if you don't want to do that. If you do and you're crazy enough, feel free. Assault bikes are a good way of doing it, which I have one on the balcony. So yes, within that zone of training. Okay, so let's just look at some of the aspects. And this is not going to be back in biology class, because obviously I'm not a biology teacher or a science lesson. But in my opinion, when you kind of understand the adaptations that go on and how it's going to benefit your life, to have that learning there, I think is very important, because you have a reason to know why you're doing it. And then you can kind of envision that going on as you feel fitter, and as you're going to get all these benefits we're going to talk about. You understand, okay, that's why that's happening. And especially if you're in that unfortunate kind of genetic pool. Now, I know Joel Jameson said 80% of that is preventable, or cardiovascular disease, but you might have a history of cardiovascular disease in your family, so you may be in a way genetically a bit more predisposed to these cardiovascular diseases. And what I'm talking about again, heart attacks or something along those realms. So this will give you a bit more of a significance to understand it, to then stick with this kind of work as well. So the first one will be cardiac hypertrophy, which basically means your heart gets bigger in a sense. Okay, so your heart actually grows stronger, and this happens specifically in the left ventricle of the heart, and that's the ventricle that pumps the blood out away from your body. All these things are muscles. The left ventricle is a muscle, so when we're putting it under work, it's obviously going to get stronger. Okay. Now, before I say that, the difference between one of the reasons the difference between the adaptations, when you're looking and people say, well, why can't you not just get these same things from interval training or high intensity training? When you do this lower intensity work, where we're talking about 120, 150 beats per minute, you're allowing a maximal amount of blood to enter your heart and to be excreted out of it. Okay, so it's fully inflating and then deflating, fully expanding and then contracting to its maximal degree. Okay, think of a balloon. You're blowing it up as much as you can, and then you're letting all the air out to the point where there's none left, and you do it again and again. So the muscles of it are getting full expansion and compression and strength contraction. Doing high intensity exercise is so high intensity that it's not allowing the heart to fully expand and deflate again. You're only going to get a little bit in, a little bit out, because it's beating too quick. Okay, so it's at too high an intensity for it to fully expand. Okay, so that's the difference. Same for weight training in a sense. So once the muscle of the left ventricle gets stronger, what's going to happen then? It's going to be able to pump more blood out away. Okay, in every single beat. So as the heart gets stronger, you can pump more blood away for the same amount of effort. And this is referred to as stroke volume. So the definition would be an increase in stroke volume from training allows the same amount of blood to be transported around the body with fewer heart contractions. So now your heart is working less because the muscles are stronger. Okay, and obviously when we get that from training, think back to everyday life. Then it's a good thing we're kind of working smarter rather than harder in every aspect. Yeah. Related to the increase in stroke volume, so the amount of blood your heart can push out in a single beat, that's going to allow us to pump more blood around the body. In the blood's going to be oxygen, so we're getting more oxygen to our muscles and other systems of the body, which is great. And again, within that is going to be other minerals and the rest of the things the blood carries. So now we're fueling our body better with less work, purely from that. As we said, because the heart has got stronger and the stroke volume has got up, so it allows us to pump more blood out, what's going to happen then is your resting heart rate's going to go down because your heart doesn't have to do as much. So one way which will be a measure of fitness, if we're looking at this, will be your resting heart rate. The fitter someone is, the lower the resting heart rate's going to be for most people. So there's difference of opinion. Some people like a resting heart rate under 60, and now it's going to differentiate depending on people's age and stuff as well, but if you can kind of aim for under 60, that's going to be a good heart rate. Obviously, the fitter someone is, maybe the younger they are, they could have resting heart rates in the 50s or even 40s. I think the lowest ever resting heart rate is like 26. But one of the ways which will measure your progress in relation to your fitness will be your resting heart rate. So you'll measure your resting heart rate at the start. So do that when I'm waking. You might, if you're going to do it the old school way, or just put your Apple Watch on in the morning while you're in bed before you got up, measure that. And then you shall see as you start to get fitter that resting heart rate is going to go down. And again, we need to see progress. I can't remember who said it. Someone said last week, like, the reason people leave the gym, no one ever leaves the gym because they're making progress. People leave the gym because they're not making progress. So the more measures of progress we can have, the more ways we can see we're improving. Again, that non-scale weight victories in a sense. Because all this will lead, most of the time, it's going to lead to allowing that weight to come down in combination with all the stuff we've talked about. Now, the next fascinating adaptation, what happens is we actually get an increase in capillaries. And capillaries are very tiny blood vessels, and they help to connect our arteries and veins in regards blood flow, oxygens, bringing oxygen to and from, and also facilitate the exchange of other elements between your blood and tissues. So think of like blood flow and all the stuff that entails carrying oxygenated and deoxygenated blood between arteries and veins and tissues and organs and stuff. So we get an increase in the density of those capillaries, and this happens in your muscles and also in your alveoli. The little muscles in your lungs that are involved in respiration. Are you breathing? As we get an increase in the density of these capillaries, that's going to help everything. You think of blood flow, we can look at like your metabolism. It's going to help in metabolizing glucose and fat in our muscles. So it's going to, use a soundbite here, it's going to improve your metabolism. When we have more capillaries around the alveoli, gas exchange is going to be more rapid and efficient. Again, we're going to breathe better in a sense. And from someone, I have had asthma all my life. There's been time, I know the fitter I am, the better my asthma is, the better I can breathe. And this is going to relate to another thing we're going to talk about in the future. And I think they've even seen, now I know this is in relation to breathing mechanics, but a lot of swimmers and that get into it, swimming to improve their asthma. But one of the reasons is going to be that respiration effect, going to allow us to breathe better, that lung capacity and lung strength. Next thing, one of the major health benefits that is going to tie into why a lot of people are suffering from cardiovascular disease, and which we can see so prominently in today's society, is blood pressure. How many people have high blood pressure? So, improving aerobic fitness, we're going to get a reduction in our resting blood pressure. And this is going to happen from, there's lots of mechanisms going on in the artery walls, again, because our heart is pumping more blood around, pumping more blood freely. And there is also some mechanisms involved in water retention and how easy the blood can flow through the arteries, etc., as well. But that's beyond my scope of this. I actually used to go out with a cardiologist, and I'm a bit annoyed I didn't take more notes. But yes, obviously blood pressure is an indication of overall health. And one of the reasons is going to be the long-term relaxation of those blood vessels. So the less the heart has to do and the more freely the blood can go around, as well as the anti-inflammatory effect aerobic training has, which we're going to talk about as well. All those combinations are going to allow kind of less damage to the blood vessels and arteries and allow that blood to move freely, which cause our body to do less work, which is obviously what we want. You're going to have an increase in blood volume, like we said. We're going to allow more blood to be able to circulate the body. Within blood, we obviously have red blood cells, plasma, hemoglobin, all these things are involved in your overall energy as well. Pumping more goodness around the body, around the engine. We've all heard of the same mitochondria, which is the little kind of powerhouse of cells that are involved in making energy. We're going to get more mitochondria, okay, which again is going to increase our ability to make energy. And that will be involved in like fat burning in a sense, and metabolism. That's involved in like fat oxidation and utilization as well. Lower cardiovascular risk, as I said. We heard of respiration. Another thing which I can definitely attest to will be kind of more the mental health side of it. Now I know training in general, but specifically like aerobic training, where interval training is very stressful on the body. It is more primed to use like your stress hormones, so your adrenaline, noradrenaline, which is why you probably feel wiped out after doing very high intensity training. Where aerobic training, it's less stress on the body, and one of the things that tie into this, we're going to be your endorphin levels after, which are like anti-anxiety in nature. They're going to help anxiety, depression, all these good chemicals we're pumping around the body as well. And longevity, so VO2 max, all these things we've talked about is energy production in the body. So that's our life form basically, is making energy. I bet we can make energy, and bet all these systems can work, the more longevity we have. But specifically, they've linked longevity to your VO2 max, and that's your level of fitness. So the fitter someone is, the longer they live. Okay, tied into that, the second probably most priority would be your muscle mass. So which is why we always want a nice mix of aerobic training with resistance training, because obviously we lose muscle as we get older, and then that can tie into the less muscle someone has as they get older, the less they're going to move around, so the less they're going to be able to do this aerobic work. So they're kind of your two big bucks, but I think specifically number one ties to all cause mortality will be longevity. And the other second last thing we're going to look at will be stress reduction. And this is when we can compare interval training to this as well. So interval training, as I said, is very highly stressful on the body. In today's world, stress is a prominent thing in the case that's too much. So we don't sleep as well, we're smashing caffeine all day, have a Red Bull here in front of me, but we're actually in lockdown at the moment. So I find obviously we can train harder, and I can drink a little bit more caffeine because I have all this other, I'm sleeping better, I have less stress throughout the day. But when we compile all these stress on top of each other, it's going to be a tipping point. So we have stress within job, deadlines, relationship stress, financial stress, career stress, all that kind of what's referred to as your allostatic load. It's the amount of stress your body can handle. Well, if we then throw really high intensity training on top of that, it's actually going to have the counterproductive effect in making us sick and stressing our body out. And when our body's in a stress state, and when we've hit allostatic load, you're not going to get sick, or like your body's not going to work properly in a sense. So aerobic training is actually stress reducing in nature, okay, which is why we're going to talk about how to program it in on as your quote unquote rest days. So I actually prefer movement over complete rest, and we'll talk about why at the end. We've talked about how your heart gets stronger, your resting heart rate goes down. We've talked briefly about how your aerobic system is kind of anti-inflammatory in nature, so it's going to combat a lot of the stuff going on. One of the reasons, as we get to kind of we get a fitter heart, stronger heart, lower resting heart rate, it's going to tie into us being able to actually handle stress more, in the sense that our body will find it easier to switch over to what's called our rest and recovery zone, or in the science terms, parasympathetic state. So we can switch over quicker. So the fitter our body is, the better our ability to handle stress. Excellent. Again, think of it, if we're putting our body under a controlled stress there often, that's going to be one of the best ways, because then when we get floods of this adrenaline and noradrenaline, we want to punch someone out in the office, our body's kind of used to bringing the heart rate down nice and quick, and then reverting back to that rest and recovery zone, so we don't get charged for murder when we couldn't kill that person and work. We all have them. I work from home. No, actually, I work with Louise, so you can guess who that is. So yes, and that ties into that stress reducing effect. We've all heard of the talking about cardiovascular disease, said a CEO who's 40s or 50s under a lot of stress suddenly drops dead of a heart attack, and they go, well, he ran every day, I don't know why he dropped dead. Think of it, if we're again training and people are running, they might feel psychologically better, but if they're physiologically pushing past that into those real high maximal heart rate zones, that's a lot of stress on the body. So that's actually the thing that could, in with everything else, now suddenly it's not beneficial. Suddenly it's actually a big negative on the body. Again, from own personal opinion, when I'm doing more cardiovascular training, when you get more endorphins going, when your body's a bit more relaxed in a sense, you do feel better. You do feel less on edge, less anxious, like you want to kill anyone. Again, well, all these things we look at. So yeah, most people, especially people listening to this that are like me, are gonna do that. And in relation to weight training, the last point, as you get fitter, what basically that means, one of the aspects is your heart rate's going to come down quicker between bouts of activity, either sets or workouts or whatever it is. So if your goal is to weight train, you go, well, Sean, why do I need the cardiovascular fitness? All the aspects which I talked about, which you won't get from resistance training, but also you'll actually recover quicker in between your resistance training sets. Okay, perfect. Which again, if your goal is muscle mass or whatever it is, that's going to allow you to lift more load in a sense, because your body's recovered. You can get back into the lower heart rate zones and push that intensity higher again. All the mechanisms that go on, like we talked about when we're aerobic training adaptations, it's going to improve our ability to make one of the units of our overall energy, which is referred to as ATP. So again, if someone's doing heavy lifts, it speeds that mechanism up that we can make ATP quicker, again, go lift heavier again. Or if it's like sprint, your aerobic base is going to allow you to get a nice big peak if your goal is resistance training, or if it's even interval training, or you might be in a sport where it's like a bit more stop-start. The bigger your aerobic base, you're going to have a better way to refuel that ATP to be able to use again. It is why when I stupidly used to get people, and we all had the first session, and we go, okay, we're going to do a weight session, and we're going to finish off with like some intervals. I'm going to get you on the sub bike, I'm going to get you on the prowler or the sled or the ropes, and I'm going to kill you because you want to train hard. I'm going to show you how to train hard, so we're going to kill you. They might do a real all-out effort on the assault bike or prowler, push it up and back. You go, yo, good, okay, just get full recovery, we'll go again. They could be in the second one, third one, approximately on average this happens. And I'll start to notice the face go a bit whiter. I'll go, you feeling alright? They go, yeah. Obviously from kind of a bit embarrassing as well. They don't want to show that direct. So on our first session, they go, nah, I can go again, it's all good. I said, alright, if you want to go again, go again. Bang, up and back. Look at them. The kind of look of like, knowing you've had about a few shots and you go, I'm not really drunk. And then suddenly it all hits you. That's the look I used to get, and I just go, oh, fuck. I think this person's going to get sick. They would never throw up on the gym floor. Like, they would obviously kind enough to go down into the toilet. Whether they got sick, sometimes they did, or whether they felt sick. And I used to go, why is this happening? Fast forward to today, like we talked about, if someone doesn't have a good aerobic base, when they do this very high interval training, and again, you may have gone straight into one of these classes, you don't have a good ability to basically clear all these byproducts of high intensity training, lactate, hydrogen, all this stuff that is the byproduct of this hard training. We don't have a good ability to clear that, hence that kind of that sick feeling. And then you don't have a good ability to be able to go again because you don't have a good aerobic base, so your body's not really primed to make ATP quickly, and then, as I said, clear all these byproducts out, and that's when you feel like death. So if your goal is to eventually go into like more high intensity training, you need a good aerobic base because that's going to further your ability to repeat the effort without feeling like death. Okay, again, going to relate back into how I'm going to tell you how to program this on a long-term scale or even over a few weeks. Okay, now we talked about that. Let's look at some of the methods that we can do to aerobically train. We've heard all the benefits, Sean. How do I do it? Someone said, I can't remember who quoted this, I'll try to find it after, but they said your heart's a dumb muscle, so you just need some activity that gets you in that zone where it's like 120 to 150. And that is really it in a sense. There's some other more complex methods, so don't turn off the podcast now. But the first thing would be basically what's called cardiac output. And we probably were at start most people. And again, it's keeping your heart rate within that zone for anywhere from say 30 to 60 minutes. As someone gets very fit, it could be like a 90-minute session. But again, I'm looking at most people who are a bit time poor. Anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. Again, you should be able to talk at his pace, not gasping for breath. And within this, you can utilize any form of cardiovascular training. Now, the prerequisites for this, as you can hear my notes turning, I came prepared for this episode. The prerequisites for this, when I think about cardiovascular training, our goal is to work our heart. It's not to kill our joints and tendons and cause injury. So, I know when I'm talking about cardio, you're thinking of road running. And during lockdown now, we see people out running. Again, activity is great, but I'm always trying to look and tick all the boxes. So I want to work your heart, but I don't want to cause high impact on the body, which is then going to cause injury, and then going to cause eventually you not being able to train, which nobody wants. So running for most people, like I've said before, is very high impact, especially if you're out of shape and you're overweight and you're deconditioned. You can't just pull the car to the scrapyard and just start trying to put the pedal down, because some tires are probably broken and you're gonna crash into something where something's gonna break down. When we run, it's anywhere from like 3 to 6 times our body weight going through our joints, so it's very high impact. Again, when I see people running with like knee straps on, it kills me a bit inside. I'm like, man, just your intention's right. Do this activity on something that won't kill your joints. So let's look at stuff that won't. We can look at the bike, whether it's in the gym or whether it's out on the road. The elliptical trainer, rowers, assault bikes, ski ergs, whatever else, Versa climber, whatever type of other equipment is out there now. And we're just trying to do a session where we're going to keep our heart rate within that range. For those that may get a little bit bored, you could do say 15 minutes on the rower, 15 minutes on the bike, 15 minutes on a ski erg, rope slams. It could even be a brisk walk, because that's going to be less impact on the body. And I think for most people, especially if you have a high resting heart rate, you should be easily to be able to do a brisk walk and keep your heart rate within that zone. So if you're in the gym, you could put the treadmill on kind of a bit of an incline and then walk that way. Incline is actually going to cause less impact, even more than flat surfaces as well. So that's the boxes we're trying to pick. Within this, we could also do other low impact methods, such as like strongman training, which are basically like sleds, prowlers, rope slams, medicine ball slams. But again, this requires a little bit more coordination. So I would say start with the beginner stuff first. That general stuff first. So you may do that. Let's look at, say, periodizing it in itself for a few weeks. And these methods, again, taken from Joel Jameson's book. He's a great book on all different type of cardiovascular methods. But this is for most people. They just need to alternate between these even one or two. I'm going to mention three just for the sake of it, but even these two. So that's the first cardiac output. So it could be a case where you do this anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks. And as methods of progress or ways of looking at your progress, you'll see you could probably do the same speed, whether it's on a brisk walk. And now your heart rate's suddenly lower, so you may have to increase the speed a little bit to get the heart rate in that zone. It means you're getting fitter. The same thing for all other aspects, how you're going to measure either the distance on the row you can get without going too high into the higher heart rate zones. Time, distance, or the amount. So you might start with a 30-minute session, suddenly you're going to 40, 45, and suddenly you can do a minute. So you're increasing your overall capacity, which means you're getting stronger, which means you're getting fitter and your heart's getting stronger. Excellent. And you can see that, and your resting heart rate's going to go down. And all these other adaptations are starting to happen. As well as this, the kind of fitter someone is, their heart rate will come down quicker after exercise. So there's a cool little function on the Apple Watch where it tells you your heart rate just when you finish the session and then 2 minutes after. I think if someone is fit, they should be able to get the heart rate down. I think it's 30 beats in the minute. So if you finish your session at say 130, you should be able to get it back to 100. Around that. Okay. If that is wrong, I will put it in the show notes if I was right, but it's somewhere around that. But yeah, you can monitor that as a way your progress. Your heart rate a minute after your session or 2 minutes after, which is the Apple Watch says, and then you'll see that go down quicker each time. The next method we can look at are what's called tempo intervals. So this is when most people do interval training, in a sense, they're kind of like, they're never doing the high intensity. A lot of them are kind of touching in this, but yes. So tempo intervals it's a method, I think it was from Charlie Francis, famous sprint coach, but it's been adapted to be able to use for more aerobic work. And it's kind of a moderate intensity method that is a step up from the cardiac output. And this is, again, if your goal is to eventually get to interval training, this is training you a little bit more, because we are forcing our heart rate to get up a little bit higher, and then we're allowing it to come down. So peaking it and then letting it drop, and as we get fitter, the drop is going to be quicker. So that would be somewhere from like every minute on the minute. So you might do like a 12 to 15 second not sprint, say like a 3/4 pace work for 12 to 15 seconds. Take anywhere from 45 seconds to 60 seconds off, depending how quick your heart rate's coming down. The fitter you are, you may use that 45 seconds. If it's staying up there, make sure you're going 70%. Don't go above that. And then you can use like 60 seconds. And you could do this anywhere from like for 15 to 20 minutes, depending on where you're at. You could do, sometimes I'll do sets of 8, where I'll do set of 8, take 2-3 minutes in between, and then do that 3 sets. But just see where your ability is, and you can progress that. You could start with doing that for say 10 minutes or a few sets, and then finish off with your aerobic work at the end. So that makes up that 45-minute or an hour session or wherever it is. And the third aerobic method that we'll mention today, probably a step up again from those tempo intervals, and they're what's called high resistance intervals. And they will be something, so you need to use a piece of equipment that obviously has, like the names in the title, resistance. So something you can use where you turn the resistance up, and you're going to go say 5 to 10 seconds, followed by anywhere from like 40 to 60 seconds off. So again, go like 70% from 5 to 10 seconds on. You could use a bike, so turn the resistance up, prowler. There's some treadmills that have resistance on it, so they work like a prowler, like a sled where you push. Trying to think whatever else. You could probably use a ski erg. Oh, they don't have resistance. Probably a bike or a prowler is probably the best thing, or a Woodward treadmill. But if you don't have access to that equipment, like, don't worry about it at all. You don't have to do this kind of. But this is a method to do for that. Again, this is going to depend on your fitness levels where you're at for these. You could start doing it for anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes, or you could do sets of 6 to 8, followed by 2 to 3 minutes in between, depending on how your heart rate's at, depending how quick it comes down, and then you can slowly increase that. As I said, with the tempo intervals, if you start with say 10 to 20 minutes of doing a continuous or doing sets with breaks in between, and then just fill the rest of that workout. You don't have to do 45 to 60 minutes of high resistance intervals. Fill the rest of with just cardiac work again, where you finish on some kind of equipment and keeping your heart rate within that 120 and 150 beats per minute. Now, for the true benefits of this, because what we're doing, we're really forcing our body to change with all these systems, with our heart, our lungs, blood vessels, arteries. We need constant stimulus in regards to cardiovascular training to really force our body to adapt. So that's why it's recommended anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week. We're trying to do this training. We're trying to really force our body to adapt. The quicker we do it, the quicker we're going to get those the adaptations. Now, I know people are time poor. It's always my dilemma how to make what's optimal in science optimal for someone who's very time poor. So, what we could do, if you say train 3 times a week, and this is especially good for those beginning who can't handle a lot of weight training. As much as I'm talking about aerobic training, we still need a good percentage of our week coming from resistance training too. So we're trying to get that good mix. We're trying to get resistance training and aerobic work to get the benefits of both. Because obviously in terms of fat loss, resistance training is going to stop us from losing that muscle tone as well. We can't just do cardiovascular only while we're losing fat, because then we're going to have nothing to force our body to hold on to that muscle mass. So if someone's training 3 times a week, an option could be to do 30 minutes of your session weight training and then 30 minutes aerobic. You may ask, well, what if my weight training is in that aerobic zone? So when you're weight training, so you're supersetting, which I'll do with a lot of people, especially to save time, your heart rate could be in that zone. But I think the difference is when you're really struggling through sets and you're really pushing to failure, as we're trying to force that weight up, it causes like more, our blood pressure goes up, so it's our heart and arteries, from my understanding, are not in the same relaxed state to be able to properly get that blood flow in and out. So we need activities that we don't have to kind of grimace and forcefully push through to get the proper adaptations. But obviously they're still going to be good in a sense, but we're not going to get that true adaptations. So you could split your workout into doing 25 to 30 minutes weights, again depending on how advanced you are, and then you could do 30 minutes aerobic work, get on one of those, or 2 or 3 of those cardio equipments. It's a bit easier for those that train more often. So for those that train say 5-6 days a week, we can actually alternate cardiovascular training and weight training. So it could be a case, weight train Monday, cardio train Tuesday, weight train Wednesday, cardio train Thursday. And again, depending how sore you are, depending your whether you begin, intermediate, advanced, you could do weight train Friday, Saturday, or then fit in a cardio. Again, depending on where you're at. The benefit, as we said, of cardiovascular training when we're training in the zone is it's going to actually improve recovery, because we're getting more blood flow around the body, and it's going to cause us to get back into this rest and recovery zone. So it's probably actually more beneficial than just taking a rest day completely, because even when we rest, when we don't do anything, we're not going to get increased blood flow around the body, and that's going to help recovery. So a lot of the time these are referred to recovery days, where they'll do something in sports, like they might go really hard, and the next day will be more like a skills day, but they're still keeping the heart rate in the zone. And this is kind of referred to like polarization, where we're going hard, easy, hard, easy. Another idea for those who are time poor, we've obviously talked about the importance of getting our steps up, etc. And we said, well, we can actually a lot of time do this cardiovascular work with a brisk walk. So for people that may have the weight training, they may just free up another part of the day to get their steps in, but they also might do this in a way that their heart rate's elevated. So you might just do a very brisk walk where you're getting these adaptations from a walk, we're getting our steps and we're burning calories that way. And then if our time's limited, whether we're training at home, whether we're training in the gym, we could save that for the majority of our weight training too. So that's an idea. Again, just think of where you're at. It could be, I know, it could be taking like business calls as you walk. For those who are in a position to purchase some equipment, you could actually get a treadmill or a bike. I know people have. Take the call on the bike. Get your heart rate in a zone. You're still going to be able to talk. And now we are really condensing our time in a way that's still going to be beneficial for our health as well. Like we talked about, that polarization effect, where the majority of our time is going to be spent in medium to easy work, where that aerobic work still going to be challenging, and then a small percentage of that week is going to be like higher intensity weight training. This is the way our body needs to be programmed for a few reasons, and it's why I have gripe with all these high intensity classes where they're trying to kill you every day. They're going, okay, well, let's try to burn this amount of calories. Whether their heart is in the right place, I don't know, or whether it's just some sleazy marketing. When someone's putting the foot down every day in the pedal and training at maximum intensity in zones, what do you think is going to happen? We talked about how stressed we are in today's world, but our body's not made to train like that every day. There may be a tiny percentage of the population that you may see on Instagram who's genetically blessed, who doesn't have a job, who probably sleeps 10 hours a night, who has the food in check, has no other stress anywhere else. Maybe for that person. But for you, and who has no recovery ability to recover from these bouts, it's too high intense, you're going to put yourself into a hole. As well as this, you're not going to enjoy it. You're going to associate like boot camp style workouts. Oh my God, to lose weight, I need to kill myself. We all heard these phrases like, if you're not training hard, like, what are you doing? You have to train hard. You have to kill yourself to lose fat. And that's not the case at all, for health reasons as well. One of my clients, Emma, who I also had on, she was saying this the same way. She used to be lying in bed with ice packs on her knees and ankles from doing all this high intensity work with all these stupid plyometric jumps, which you see people talk about on Instagram. And again, as we talked about running, that's such high impact for people, and they're getting the double whammy where they're training the too high intensity to recover from. So they're gonna kill the body. This, if we look at in terms of fat loss, when we reach that allostatic load where stress is so high, what's going to happen is going to drive rates of binge eating up, because our body's trying to recover. You're going to crave lots of carbohydrates, lots of processed carbohydrates. And if I think of the typical person, normally it's in the 20s, because when your body's in your 20s, a bit more resilient in regards to like stupid exercise, which you don't get away with in your 30s and 40s and 50s or 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever age you are. But yeah, so if I think of, say, F45, I'm looking at like, it's normally the people in their 20s, terrible form, but their body can withstand a little bit more. But I may see the typical person who, again, is into that fitness, who heart's in the right place, but they're trying to train hard every day, doing this type of training, push their limit. Then they're drinking coffee straight away, and then they're going straight into meetings, not sleeping, partying. What happens come Friday? They're going to binge out. They're going to ruin the whole deficit of the week. And then they'll probably say, oh, fuck it, the rest of the weekend, binge eat the rest of the weekend. And then that continues, and so on and so on. So our body is not able for that high intensity all the time. We need to periodize it in a way where the most of our week is doing this more aerobic, kind of easier type work, recovery type work. And then we can put the foot down a day or two, whether that's weight training or whether then we progress after a few weeks, a few months of this type of aerobic work to doing some kind of interval training in there. And we'll do a separate episode on interval training. But I always want to get across that, like, you don't have more advantage doing interval training. Actually, you have less advantage in the cases that I talk about here if you're in the boat like most people. Like I said, I've changed my tune a few times over the years. I used to look, when I'm working in commercial gyms, I used to look and say like Zumba or even like the step up class. I used to go, that is a load of shite. It always comes full circle. I look at it now and go, do you know what? They probably enjoy that class. There's less impact on the joints. It's fun, as I said, and their heart rate's probably in that zone, and that's actually probably a way better choice than a lot of the classes we'll see now. One question I always get will be like spin classes. I think the problem with spin classes, and again, I'm looking at if you want the bang for your buck, optimal type training. Spin class, we looked at heart rate zones. A lot of the time they're doing it. Okay, again, heart's in the right place a lot of time, but they're probably pushing too high into those heart rate zones when you're in that, like, what's called lactate threshold. So it's a bit more stressful on the body as we reach that, and then we reach more maximal heart rate as, quote unquote, like your lactic acid starts to build up in your muscles. Although it's probably other stuff, not lactate, hydrogen stuff, but that's for another episode as well. But that's it's too high heart rates you're looking at. If you want to do real high intensity, you have to do it in a way where you get your heart rate high, but then get a full recovery. But in this one, we're getting a heart rate really high, trying to get maximum, and then we're coming back down into not getting a full recovery into that lactate threshold, and we're doing that, and we're missing the boat. So you should either do, if you're to do it properly, in my opinion, and for most group training, they would actually strap a heart rate onto everyone in that class, and they would tell people what zone to stay in for that class. So in regards conditioning, it is interesting thought. If I ran a conditioning small group training, you would periodize it. You'd have a day where it's like an easier aerobic day / recovery day, and then 1 or 2 days a week would be your higher intensity days. And then you could tell people what's your heart rate in the screen, stay within the zone for today's class or based on your recovery. That's how I would do it. So if anyone else that wants to fund that thought, that someone will probably steal and make millions off, but at least I'll put it out there. And the last point I want to make from my notes here, when we're doing this aerobic work, the heart rate work, cardiac output work, you could also use like med ball circuits. Look at his name's gone blank. Dr. Pat Davison, but he gets it off Derek Hansen, who has a good med ball circuit. I think it's on YouTube. I actually did that yesterday. I did a 30 to 45 minutes, I think it was, with a 6 kilo medicine ball, and kept my heart rate in that zone. And again, that's going to allow you to kind of train different different movements that can be, quote unquote, a bit more functional, and change it up a little bit. And as well as that, you're probably shouting and saying, well, what about yoga and mobility? For people that are very unfit, you could actually probably do a mobility in a yoga class and keep your heart rate in that zone as well. So that's definitely an idea for those days where you're trying to use aerobic train as your recovery. You could use that as well. I think that is all. That is all I have in my notes, unless there is anything else. If you have any questions on today's podcast, and again, it's always hard trying to condense everything into a little thing. Please let me know. In relation to heart rate monitors, the best one, again, which I have no affiliate link to, I wish I did because they're a great business, would be Polar. So the Polar H10 heart rate strap, closer to your heart, the better. It goes right into your rib cage. That's going to be more accurate than a lot of other heart rate monitors, but again, whatever you have, you can use once it's consistent. With cardio work as well, we're trying to look at it in the same way we would in the gym. So we're trying to do, for every like push exercise, bench press, we're trying to do a pull, a row. You're trying to balance all the muscles of the body so none get like too strong and then none get too weak. That causes more imbalance. We'll try to probably do a similar way with aerobic training as well. So a lot of the aerobic training would be like more quad dominant if you think of walking, running, biking, on the elliptical as well. So if you can have access to equipment, you'll probably try to do a mix of both, where one day you might just do a bit more quad dominant work, say on the bike. Next day you might do something to do upper body, whether that's like just using the top of the assault bike or like the ski erg. Another day you would do something a bit more hamstring dominant, which could be like sled pulls if you're using a certain way. And then another day you could be using an upper body push, where you might do like med ball slams or throws. But just think of it in that in a way. Try to mix up between your upper and lower body if you're going to keep it in very simple terms as well, to make sure you're getting a mix of both. Swimming as well, forgot about that. That's obviously full body and some great different movement patterns in that. For those that are into sports, last point, yes, fitness is sport specific if you are playing a specific sport. What I said specific 3 times, but just to get that point across. So Lance Armstrong will not be able to transfer his like fitness over to running a marathon or doing something else or swimming. It's specific to be able to oxidize, get fuel and from a specific muscle. So you have to condition the muscle you're trying to use for that sport as well. So if anyone played sports, my advice towards the season is to stick with whatever movement you're doing. But in the off season, a great way would be to mix it up and get an overall cardiovascular base with all the other movements as well. That's just if we have any Sunday heroes that play sports. Although we're in lockdown, so I don't know what we can actually do these days. Close probably to playing FIFA. So there you go. Hopefully that covered everything within that episode. All the benefits in terms of fat loss, in terms of health, in terms of mental health, and all the other aspects of life. I don't know how many other rest I need to talk about for you to start doing some aerobic training. I think that's a pretty extensive list. And if you can't find a reason to do that in there, then I give up. Please have any questions, send them across to me, and I can cover in the next one. We can do a full one on interval training and different methods, but only after you've done a few weeks or months of this work. Then we can do the harder stuff when your body's in a place to do so. There you go. If you liked the episode, or even if you didn't, please rate and review a good one on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. And because we're in the whole social media age, go on, put it on your story so we can spread the good word and get all this good information out there and stop people killing themselves doing high intensity classes with boot camps, where boot camps are made for people in the army. It's not made for Mrs. Jones trying to get in shape, or all the rest of these high intensity ones that are trying to use all this, jump on the back of this interval training. Whereas after listening, now to this podcast, there's no benefit of it compared to the others. I hope you all have a good day, week, and month, wherever you are in the world, and I'll speak to you on the next episode.